everyone, I'm Megan. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really great topic for candidates about how to interview. It's a really important topic, so definitely tune in. We have a fantastic panel to talk about that as well. We have first our president of Twice as Nice Recruiting, Patrick Cahill. Patrick, how are you?
Just like an interview in Canada, I'm excited but a little nervous about where we're going to go with this.
That's okay. We all are. Carolee Coleman is our VP of Search. She also joins us today. And Carolee, how are you?
Just living the dream.
Living the dream, equally nervous. We're all in here together. It's okay. So like I said, we have a really great topic today for candidates specifically because the job market is really competitive for you today. We wanted to take a few minutes and talk about how to go over an interview, how to nail an interview, and how to show up confidently within your answers and yourself when you are interviewing for this role, which hopefully is your next dream role. But first, let's get to know each other. We are Twice as Nice Recruiting, and we do one thing, and that's permanent placement. We build every single search from scratch. We have a 9.9% placement fee, and we guarantee your placements for 18 months. We've worked with more than 1,800 clients to fill roles across the board, and today we're redefining recruitment. Okay, so we're gonna break down a few mistakes that candidates may be making when they're interviewing for these roles. But first, I'm curious, what is the biggest mistake that y'all see from candidates?
I think the biggest mistake is not being prepared. And I feel like there's nothing else that makes you more nervous than not being prepared coming into something, knowing you should have put more effort in ahead of time. And so not being prepared could include not knowing enough about the company that you're interviewing for, the person you're interviewing with, the role. Maybe you didn't reread the job description, or even the skills that they're looking for. It could even be as bad as not knowing your own resume and what you have listed as your skills and your experience throughout the years. Could be not dressing in a way that makes you feel professional and maybe not meeting whatever dress code that company might have. Or it could even be just not being prepared kind of socially in a sense, not having your social media profiles on lockdown.
Media lockdown, I think we often think about the disaster. There's just various things that I think our mind goes to, but I think a more relatable social media lockdown example is, I think a lot of times people think of LinkedIn as a little bit more fast and loose than a resume. But you have to remember that employers are looking at everything they have access to. And if your resume that you spent so much time focused on to make sure it's accurate, represents what you do well, if that disagrees with your LinkedIn account, if there's a discrepancy, the employer is not gonna be like, oh, they probably just don't take LinkedIn seriously and just threw some dates up and didn't think much about it. They'll start questioning whether there was some intent to deceive.
So I'm curious what the solutions are, Patrick, if you could talk about this. If you're going into an interview and you need to be prepared, how can you do that? What are some tips that you might be able to give some candidates so that they can show up to these interviews confidently?
I think the inverse of the mistake is kind of the solution. Researching who it is you're going to be speaking with, what the company prides itself on. If you don't know who you're going to be interviewing with, just the simple act of sending an email to the person who scheduled the interview asking, hey, so I can better prepare, do you know who I'll be speaking with? That in itself shows that you're a prepared candidate and you've got your act together. Try to jot down some notes about the individuals you're going to speak with, unique things about their background, things that you're interested in learning about their experience and how they got from point A to point B. And then, the last thing before I hand it over to Carolee, I would say is, if you've done your homework, come up with smooth ways to show that you've done your homework. You don't want to be like, well, when I was doing my research, if you have to, you can do that. But what's the smoother thing is, so I noticed in 2017, there was a major expansion, but I couldn't figure out what was going on there. What happened? Was there a change of ownership? Was there an influx of cash? Or, hey, I saw that you actually studied, chemistry, but here you are focused on social services. What made that transition occur? Those little things can make a huge impact on impression and distinguish you from most people who either haven't prepared or are not prepared enough to actually incorporate it into their conversation.
I think those are definitely key. And then in addition to that, creating notes for yourself and having them handy, especially if it's a phone interview or a video interview, having short notes that you could reference. And those notes could be about maybe major accomplishments that you've had or stats that you want to have on hand in terms of your performance and your growth across the years. And then when you have those notes prepared, then you want to practice. So maybe think of common questions that you may be asked, or try to Google and figure out questions that people would ask for the type of role that you're interviewing for. And either practice with a friend or a family member, or practice online on your own. You could go into a Google Meet by yourself and just pretend you're in an interview and practice that whole video setup and what it's like to see yourself on the screen as you're talking, or even just in a room by yourself, going through and pretending that you're getting interviewed so that you're ready and it's not the first time that you're answering these questions. That can definitely help to put some nerves at ease.
Those are a lot of really fantastic tips. And a lot of those are kind of what to do before or during an interview.
That's true.
But I'm curious, like kind of toward the end of an interview, a lot of times employers will ask, hey, do you have any questions? Um, are candidates making mistakes there, like toward the end of the interview when they're trying to wrap things up?
Definitely. And it could go one of two ways. It could be not having any questions to ask. That is definitely not good. Or not having thoughtful questions and just kind of asking boilerplate questions that make it seem like you're not prepared. So you want to make sure that you have questions prepared ahead of time and make them specific about the job and the company. You could even be asking questions of the interviewer. Perhaps they've been at the company for 7 years. And so you could ask them what it's been like. What has their growth and entire experience been like? And maybe what would their tips be for someone to be successful at that company within their first 60 or 90 days? And then you also want to make sure that you're not negative with your questions.
I think that the questions candidates ask can really be eye-opening from, revealing aspects of the personality. And so, a form of a negative question could be, I really don't like it when my managers micromanage me. Are you a micromanager? Like that's a pretty negative way to ask, like, hey, how do the teams work together and how do you like to lead your teams? You can potentially get to the same answer. Without coming off like maybe there's something there that I should be worried about.
What other mistakes might candidates be making when it comes to interviewing?
One of the things that come to mind is interest. So not showing your interest in an opportunity, maybe being a little bit too coy or shy and making it seem nonchalant, like it doesn't matter if this job opportunity comes to fruition, you don't really care. If it's a job that you're really interested in, you don't want to do that. I think confidence is also something that can cause some issues, and on both ends, right? If you come into the interview being too confident and cocky, that could be not great. If you come into it lacking all confidence, then the employer might not feel confident in you being the right fit for the job either.
I think it's a real careful balance. I think some people, their natural defense mechanism when they're nervous or feeling insecure is they come off as the opposite. But it can really throw employers off. Like, that's a really difficult personality. I don't have to deal with that. And yeah, there's also, and this is a two-way issue. Sometimes employers come off as too cool as well. And we often are coaching them, hey, if you're interested in this candidate, there's no harm in making sure they know that. It's because at the end of the day, everyone's a person trying to figure out where am I going to be happy? What's the best next step for me? And so, having that confidence in your capability to do the role, but also like the humility to share that this would be a really exciting opportunity for you, I think it's an important balance.
What I'm hearing a lot of both of you all say is just remember the humanity aspect of it. And that's actually a lot of what we talked about, for employers too, is understand that they're human and you need to show interest in them and their company, as well as they need to show that to you. And if we all kind of ego check for a sec and say, hey, like this, I'm really excited about this opportunity. I want you to know I want to work here and here's why. And you can come off really genuine, then that might go a long way to be able to have that human connection and to get that role that hopefully you want.
Yeah, I will say there's kind of a next level too of like sometimes challenges for candidates, which are candidates that are really struggling in the job market, where it's been a long time. and they feel like they keep getting cut at the last stage, or they have an increasing level of kind of baggage that they're bringing to the interviews, and they really struggle to shed that baggage and not assume, you're the next employer who's going to hurt me. And it's a really understandable situation. But I just would, to candidates that might be feeling that way or can recognize, like, I do have this sense of like dread and negativity, and I'm just waiting for like this opportunity to close in front of me, even though I feel like I'm getting close. I just know it's going to happen again. It may happen again, but this employer is not responsible for all those other aspects or those other opportunities that shut down. And there may be an element that you're contributing to it. It may not be, but what's not going to help is for you to share how bad it's gone in the past and how you just know they're going to cut you. Or when they do say, hey, we're so sorry, we're going another direction, you fire off that angry email because you know what? That company that's been around for 20 years might be around for another 20 years. And the fact that they engaged with you means there was a level of interest, and there could be interest again.
Those are really good tips. I think it is hard because the job market is so competitive for a lot of people now that sometimes, especially with, some larger layoffs, some people can be looking for a job for a while, but hopefully a lot of these tips can help them land those perfect jobs. Carolee, I'm curious about kind of the length of answers. I know personally, I'm a bit of a rambler. If someone asks me something, I'll go on for days. You got to cut me off at some point. Is there a strategy to kind of having short and succinct answers, or can you go on too long, or can they be too short?
You don't want to ramble. I think where people often get into trouble is where they ramble so much and they're not actually answering the question, or they're getting off topic and digging holes for themselves. And so that's where I think practicing comes into play, because practicing your answers and making sure you're confident in knowing how to answer different questions can really help, and it can help build confidence by practicing. And so knowing how to speak on your experiences and about giving examples, having some examples prepared can help you to have short and succinct answers. You don't want to be so short that you're not giving those details, though. So it's that happy medium, that Goldilocks. You don't want to be rambling so much that someone's losing interest and maybe checking out and listening. And you don't want to be so short that they're like, they told me nothing, so I guess I'll try to ask again, or I'm going to move on and give up.
I object a little to the idea of Goldilocks. I think that, a lot of employers are hoping for a fit. And so they're while they come to those interviews, worried that maybe they're going to be misled, worried about something not being right about a resume if LinkedIn profile doesn't match. For the most part, if you're interviewing with them, they want this to work. They want the search to be over. They want to move on to the next thing. And so I don't want candidates to get too stressed out like there's a perfect word count. But I will say that an experienced interviewer will be able to distinguish between an inexperienced interviewer who's rambling because they're nervous but has the best of intentions, and someone who's lying to them. And so usually when I hear people rambling, my mind starts going to, they're not confident because what they're saying is an exaggeration or not true. And that makes me dive in more. And so that's just, and if you notice that the interviewer is poking more after you just said a lot and you're not lying, that's probably evidence that you need to keep those answers a little shorter because you're confusing them why you just spoke so much.
All really fantastic tips. Sounds like practice makes perfect. That's a saying for a reason. Come prepared, practice, be confident, name and claim your experience and what you've gone through. And it sounds like candidates will be just fine out there. I know the job market is tough, but we hope that these tips and resources have really helped you out. We have a few other videos that we'll link in the description. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Redefining Recruitment, and we wish you the best in your job search.